Good morning. This is Joe Forward, legal writer for the State Bar of Wisconsin. And today we're talking about mental health and the law. And here with me today to talk about that is attorney Amanda Pirt Meyer. Amanda is an attorney with Haskins Short Brindley in the Monona, Madison area. And she focuses her practice on Social Security disability law, guardianships, estate planning, probate law, elder law issues, and special needs trust. Amanda is also an author on a State Bar of Wisconsin PINNACLE book that is coming out next month or this month even. It's called Mental Health Law in Wisconsin, a guide for legal and healthcare professionals. And so Amanda was an author on that book, along with many other authors who dive deep into mental health law issues in Wisconsin. And Amanda is going to talk to us a little bit about the book and her practice today. Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Doing well. So Amanda, thanks so much for joining us. I wanted to just ask you about your practice and your the mental health issues that come up in your practice, and then your involvement with the book. So give us give us an idea of what your practice involves.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I like to joke that my brand of client is someone that has at least 2 or 3 completely distinct issues that are slightly interrelated. And this is very common with elder, disability, estate planning, guardianship kind of work. I'm also one of the litigators here. There are 2 of us. I have a background in what I like to fondly call ambulance chasing plaintiff's work. So when I did that, I did quite a bit of probate work for them as well. So I love sort of the interaction of this particular book pulls together a lot of these little issues in many different areas of law and kind of winds them all together. And that's kind of what I find that I do all day. For the past 2 years, I've been doing more of kind of, I call it like a pandemic sort of collection of these things. We also do Medicaid qualification at the firm. So typically when I have someone I do a guardianship for example, they may have powers of attorney or estate planning needs that need to be done, a special needs trust in order to protect some of the assets for a couple where someone is having a health issue. And so having a little bit of knowledge of all these things wraps together really well. Very recently, I was just elected the president of Miami-Dade County. So I have a special sort of predilection maybe for doing a lot of the mental health work. Before I joined Haskins Short Brindley a couple of years ago, I did Social Security disability work exclusively for 3 years. And during that time, what I found was that there were many attorneys that were hesitant, that might be sort of underestimating the kind of connotation that I'd like to pull out of that, to take mental health cases. They're seen as more difficult. It's more difficult to illustrate the kinds of issues that come up for a human that is dealing with very severe mental health illness. I like to say that it's treated very similarly to a physical health issue, but unfortunately, mental health issues really encompass many different kinds of not just treatment, but interaction with the world at large that make those cases a little more, needy is not the word I'm looking for, but you really have to think a little more creatively in order to illustrate what these folks are going through and the kind of adaptations they've had to make and their hardship navigating the universe.
Right. And I mean, when we think about mental health law, it's really a broad brush because it crosses across a lot of practice areas, right? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, I was really excited to be on the book. Like for example, I did 1.5 chapters of the book. I think chapter 7 that I did is a really good illustration of how some of these concepts are pulled out of multiple areas and then smashed together in a way that is really cohesive. It involves informed consent. I cover sort of the tort issue of malpractice in there. There's also some ethics. Mental health. I mean, I like to joke that everyone that's mean to you is not treating adequately for a mental health, disorder, because we all sort of have one at different times. But There are times when these things come in when you are dealing with a torts file. Maybe there's an ethics violation, an OLR issue. You have someone who may be dealing with consent and whether they have capacity or they've been legally adjudicated as incompetent, and in what specificity does that actually involve? For things like guardianships, for example, someone may have a very severe mental health illness and they have been precluded from the ability to vote and get married, but maybe they can still get a fishing license and things like that. So very much kind of on the ground practicality for some of these sort of mental health things coming in, and how capacity can flex with people as they go through mental health issues, and how the law comes in to either help or protect those people to keep them more safe or more protected, hopefully get them better treatment when they can't really make the decisions to do that for themselves.
Right. Well, and why do you think it's important for attorneys to have an understanding of mental health law issues? I mean, you mentioned a lot of issues that come up, but broadly speaking, why should attorneys be up to speed on these types of things?
I think, as far as the gateway drug for what people need to know are capacity issues. And so whenever anyone meets with a new client, bankruptcy or family law, whatever it is, the idea of capacity is really falls under that kind of mental health or neurocognitive sort of assessment. And we do touch on that and what the idea of informed consent is in a medical context, but that idea of consent, confidentiality, and capacity is really an ethics line. And so if you don't have an understanding, especially with capacity, the idea of capacity flexes. I like to think of, and this is really a partial assessment of how capacity works, but a person's ability to take in information, consider the information, and then make a decision on that information, even if it's a bad one, is generally how people see capacity. And sometimes you have great capacity, and other times you may not. It may be temporary. So how do you sort of navigate the person with a mental illness, especially because if we think about like a bipolar disorder, where people will go through periods of mania or periods of depression, their capacity may change over time. Their ability to make good decisions may change over time. There's also the idea that these people may have been mistreated if we think about kind of the torts or malpractice idea, and you may have a little bit, I call it a spidey sense issue in the back of your head that, gosh, I don't know, maybe I should refer this to someone. There are so many different areas that touch on mental health, especially with things like I do Social Security disability work. There's the SSI program with an asset test. There's SSDI without the asset test. How does that affect a family law marital settlement agreement? How does that affect bankruptcy? Because knowing the kinds of benefits that a person is on, even work comp for a mental health disorder, Wisconsin is a reverse offset state. What does that mean for Social Security? Maybe you don't practice either of those areas of law, but if you're doing a bankruptcy, some estate work, you might need to know if you, as a personal injury attorney, are giving someone $40,000 as a settlement, that may divest them of their benefits that they receive for their rapid cycling bipolar disorder. And so you also want to avoid committing additional malpractice. So can you work with the human? In what way should you be more aware of that person and all of their needs? We're in a time now, especially emerging from the pandemic, where the idea of sort of mental health as something that no one talks about. We're starting to really make good strides in destigmatizing mental health treatment, mental health awareness. And so I think a lot of people that very much, even my older clients, that really push things under the rug. You just pull up your bootstraps and you get going. But then you find out that they're 75 and now they have complex PTSD from their time in Vietnam, and they don't really know how to navigate that and what that means for the different legal things that they may need to do in their universe.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the timing of this book. We're at the tail end of COVID-19,
Mhm.
and you're right. We see a lot of articles and information about mental health and how the pandemic is going to impact people moving forward. So, what is the value, I guess, of this book now for practitioners? And I think this is a book also for healthcare practitioners. So
Absolutely.
I mean,
I talked to
yeah,
actually.
what is the value on the timing of this book now for both lawyers and healthcare
Yeah,
practitioners?
I actually just spoke to two social workers at different inpatient psychiatric facilities. And when I mentioned that this book was coming out, they were very excited because one, they're not lawyers, but two, they know that the kinds of patients that they have are sometimes on multiple benefit programs. They may have a Chapter 51 that's being converted into a Chapter 54, and what's the interaction there? And what do they need to do on their side as a social worker, as a nurse practitioner? What, as far as completing paperwork, what do they know about that person being discharged to the universe? So a lot of excitement there, I think, from the different social work kind of medical community folks that I've worked with. But as far as a desk guide goes, I just love these books. I have a number of them because it is in my sort of feeling for general practitioners as they're kind of the superheroes of the universe, because I don't think that there's any way that I will sort of be an expert on every single thing that may be related to the idea of mental health, because I just don't practice in all of those areas. But I think it's important to know enough to say, maybe I should just look at that. Do I have a human that I should consult with? Because you want to make sure that not only, I mean, malpractice is always sort of hanging behind us, but as advocates for these folks, especially for folks that may have some difficulty advocating for themselves out in the world, are you doing proper customer service, essentially? I mean, my joke is that all lawyers are essentially high-level customer service workers, right? But so are you actually helping that person, or will your work with that human actually hurt them more? You need to know enough to know where your boundaries are at the very least. And I think a desk guide is a really great way to do that. I make this sort of assessment all the time when it comes to money matters. I'm not a bankruptcy attorney. I don't do creditor debtor work. I don't do eviction work. So like, where does the person sort of fit in if that's an issue? What do I need to be aware of to send it off to someone else, or at least consult with someone?
Yeah. And finally, Amanda, just up until now, has there been any resource like this, or is this I mean, has it been I know in one of the questions posed to you during this process was, how do you research mental health laws in Wisconsin now? So does this sort of bring everything together for attorneys?
Yes. I was really excited that I was contacted about doing a couple chapters in this book, because I knew that one of the bar employees who really spearheaded this had really fought for it for years, 7 or 8 years, because there is no similar guide here. The bar has never done one. There's no other sort of Wisconsin-based entity. The thing about mental health law, just like anyone else, is that there's often sort of a state statute, but it reflects back on either or mirrors something that might be a model rule that the ABA has done, or there may be something in the CFR or federal code, different kinds of federal law. And so what's the link there? Does Wisconsin exactly mirror? How are those two concepts tied together? Why do we do things differently here? And so it's the first time I've ever really seen, and I haven't even seen everyone else's chapters yet, but even sort of working on my two, and then I had a co-author on one, it's really interesting to see sort of the perspective of sort of a work comp attorney writing about work comp. I don't do that area, and how that fits in. I mean, it's just incredible. I've never seen this sort of comprehensive collection of Wisconsin state law, where it fits into the federal scheme, where it differs, what you need to know if you encounter a human who may have mental health, and maybe it was caused by a misbehaving doctor. We might have a medical PTSD. Well, let's flip open the chapter to malpractice. How does Wisconsin treat malpractice? And so I just love the idea of different areas of law in Wisconsin at different points in our statutes. They do recognize mental health. They do recognize the ethics of working with someone with mental health. But this is the first time it's all been pulled together into one manual, one book. And I know that there's a lot of regulations right now that, especially in Wisconsin, that are adapting and changing, and we're always moving. But the fact that we'd even have a baseline, I think this is a really good time for it to come out, because I think that in general, the public is much more receptive to what's there. What do we do? What's not there? What do we need to work on for different advocacy groups? It's really useful to see how these little puzzle pieces fit together, or where there simply aren't any pieces.
Attorney Amanda Pirt Meyer, thank you so much. She's the author of, one of the authors on the Mental Health Law in Wisconsin, a guide for legal and healthcare professionals. It's published by State Bar of Wisconsin PINNACLE. It should be available now, so look out for that. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. Great, helpful information. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.